What's the number one food that causes choking and death in young children? Hot dogs. Hot dogs. So if you don't know it already, hot dogs are the perfect plug for a child's airway, for the trachea, for the tube that goes from the back of the throat down into the lungs. And that tube, the trachea, actually passes through the vocal folds, which is what we use to talk and communicate. So here's the issue. The hot dog itself, and look, guys, just to prove that I had hot dogs tonight. Okay, that's the average hot dog. That's the average size. And most parents, in my experience, when they do slice them up, they slice them up about like that. We call those coins. Well, here's the problem, is that the child's trachea, the airway, it's not that it's just narrow, much more narrow than an adult's. It's that in young children, it actually is shaped differently. So young children, from infants up to about age 5, infants start with a trachea that it actually is more cone shaped, and then it goes narrow right at about the point of the vocal folds. You and I, as adults, we have a very narrow tube all the way through. Well, that cone shape over the next 5 years will slowly become more cylindrical. But that cone shape, because the children have actually a larger tongue compared to the size of the trachea, before their face starts to elongate as they become older kids, adults, etc. Well, that larger tongue, that wider opening, makes the perfect opportunity for anything to spill back into the airway. So that's one shocking reason. It actually has to do with the shape of the airway, not just the fact that it's much, much smaller, much more narrow. It also has to do with the fact that hot dogs typically expand when you cook them. So we all tend to be having fun and, making kind of quick judgments, grabbing a hot dog and just turning to our partner, our husband, our wife, whoever, and saying, hey, be sure you cut this up for the kids. But we're looking at the hot dog that isn't cooked yet. Well, once you put that thing on the grill or wherever, it will actually expand. Now you have a much bigger hot dog. But not only that, hot dogs come in all different widths. Have you ever noticed that some hot dogs are more expensive than others at the grocery store? It's because they weigh more. They have more meat. They're a much bigger dog. And if we grab a different package than didn't have last week at the barbecue, that's a totally different choking hazard for that child. So again, another shocking reason is just that we get kind of casual about it. Hot dogs show up a lot. And, they're at the baseball games this time of year, they're at the barbecues, et cetera, et cetera. And it's really easy to get too casual and just say, oh yeah, just quarter them, or oh, just cut them up. Well, when we say just cut them up, most parents will cut them into coins, thinking that because they made it nice and narrow that the child's safe, but that actually isn't the case. Here, let me show you a perfect example why. If you go to any website that talks about choking hazards, like the American Academy of Pediatrics, one of the objects that most children choke on is a penny. Look at the difference. If this is chokeable for most little kids, just imagine what this is like. And of course, they're both really skinny. So any sort of coin shaped is not the way we want to go. Not only do we want to quarter them, but we also want to consider the size of the hot dog, But remember that the coin shape is actually the worst. Finally, the third shocking reason why kids tend to choke on hot dogs is because once we get our confidence up with the hot dog, we tend to offer it with a bun. And when little kids, all the way up to age 4, when they bite into a hot dog with a bun, not only does that lead to a bigger bite, we can't help it. It's going to lead to a bigger bite in the mouth, but they also have the bun to deal with too. Now, kids can't manage big bites like that. They're just still learning how to get a nice, safe rotary chew. They still have that more narrow trachea, and they're distracted. Little kids do not have the best attention when they're eating. And when you consider that we're all running around having a good time at the barbecue, or that we're, laughing and joking and having fun. It's just so easy to choke. When you have something like a hot dog in your mouth surrounded by a bun, now you've even got more mass to lodge in that child's airway. So, not trying to scare everybody, but frankly, trying to scare everybody, because I want you to take this really seriously. Like I said, it's the number one food that children under the age of 4 choke and die from. So what are we going to do about this? Okay. As soon as we're done here tonight, I'm going to post a video. I'll put it right here and in the comments on how to cut up a hot dog that you can share with your families. Secondly, I want you to educate your neighbors, your friends, and your family on the facts in this video, especially about the shape of that airway. You could save a life just by sharing that information. And then finally, teach yourself how to do the Heimlich on a child tonight. You can easily find that information on the internet. It only takes a few minutes to take a look at it, and make sure that you file that in your brain, because you never know when you're going to need it. In my whole career as a feeding specialist, I have to tell you, I only had to prevent a child from choking, literally grab them, turn them upside down, and hit them between the shoulder blades at a preschool. And they actually choked on, they didn't serve hot dogs because they knew hot dogs were chokeable, but that child choked on Frosted Flakes. Because at the bottom of the Frosted Flakes box, there's like a couple Frosted Flakes that are all stuck together and sugary and yummy. Well, that is like a child getting a hard piece of candy, like a peppermint or a butterscotch. And that is the number 2 food item that children die from. So I had to run across the room, pick up that child, wasn't even my client, and perform a Heimlich immediately on that child. And sure enough, it came flying out of the kid's mouth, but he was turning blue and he had drool coming down his mouth. What you need to know about choking is choking typically has very little to no sound. Typically very little to no sound. So keep your eye on your kids. Even our older kids, when they're eating a hot dog, they need to be seated and make sure that an adult is present and keeping an eye on them, because you won't necessarily hear a child choking. You'll see them choking. You'll see them choking. So thanks so much for tuning in tonight and learning that really important safety message. And just as importantly, thank you for sharing that information. As I said earlier, you could save a child's life.